What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out the video. I want to talk today about a theory going around online that Errol Spence has residual neurological damage that negatively impacted his performance against Terence Crawford. Now, I've seen this several places online. It stems from a caller to the BDA Boxing Channel call-in show that they had this past weekend. A guy claiming to be a doctor called in and said that Errol Spence has residual neurological damage that impacted his coordination, his punch resistance, and so forth in the fight with Terence Crawford. So I'm going to play a couple clips here from them, and I will also post the link to the full call so you can listen for yourself and make your own decision. But these two clips I'm going to play give a pretty good synopsis of what the gentleman had to say. So here we go.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you for having me on. I just wanted to kind of share, from this perspective, I've performed neurological exams on quite a few patients over my years. And when you're looking for somebody who's either had head trauma or maybe has had a stroke, even people with dementia, which is another form of neurological damage, there's certain things that you look for. And my wife, when she saw Errol Spence enter the ring, she asked me, she's like, he looks like he's on marijuana. And I told her, I said, he has residual neurological damage from his car accident. That people have commented on this, but people, if you don't have the experience doing this, you're not going to pick up on it. So one of the things when you're doing a neurological exam on somebody, you look at, there's like a glassy look to a person's eyes when they have either a concussion or they have advanced stages of dementia. And if you compare video of Errol Spence before his accident, hey, gentlemen, thank you for having me on. It is apparent. I mean, it is embarrassing how obvious it is that he's significantly compromised. So what I would say to this is just think back to what they did to Muhammad Ali when they let him fight with Parkinson's. People will let somebody get into the ring even though there is obvious issues with their ability to perform in a boxing match. So further evidence of this is listen to his speech patterns, start comparing his speech patterns before his accident to after. There is a distinct difference in his enunciation. I know part of that is because he has dentures, but even just listen to how he is formulating his words, his thought process. He's much, much slower. Now, another component to a sign of advanced neurological damage is a loss of balance. That's why as people age, primary cause of injury for older people is falls, and that's because it is apparent.
Okay. All right. So the whole call was 20 something minutes long. It was pretty interesting, regardless of what you think of Errol Spence. But I wanted to give my thoughts on the issue. And first off, this is just a guy calling into a YouTube boxing show. We have no idea who this person is, if he's really a doctor, what his background is, or if he is who he says he is. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that the guy is a doctor. He does have a background in this and that he knows what he's talking about. Okay. Now, he's never been in the same room as Errol Spence. He's never actually examined him. He's never seen his medical records. He doesn't know what treatments Errol Spence has had, what tests he's been through, what scans he's had done, and so forth. So I think what he's saying, maybe it's true, but I see so many people online just running with this and saying, "Oh yeah, that's 100% what it was." When we don't know, Okay. Secondly, he mentions Muhammad Ali being licensed to fight, particularly against Larry Holmes there at the end of his career, when he really shouldn't have been fighting. Now, those are two different things. Okay, first off, that was a long time ago. Now, what do you think the Nevada Athletic Commission would stand to lose if they knew Errol Spence had this severe damage going into the fight? license him to fight. And let's say he goes in there against a guy like Crawford and comes out of it in a bad way. Maybe he's in a coma, or worse. Maybe he doesn't walk out of the ring. They would be opening themselves up to a massive, massive lawsuit. Okay. A lot of you may remember several years ago in a heavyweight match between Magomed Abdusalamov and Mike Perez, which aired on HBO. After the fight, Abdusalamov collapsed and eventually fell into a coma, and they had no medical personnel that could treat him at the arena. This was in New York. I believe it was at Madison Square Garden. I could be wrong on that, but it was definitely in New York. And he had to be taken to the hospital in a cab. Okay, this was about 10 years ago, I think, and he suffered severe brain injury, and he never fought again, and he's essentially crippled and severely neurologically damaged for the rest of his life, and his family has to constantly take care of him. And it was a really tragic situation that maybe didn't have to get to that point if they would have had the proper medical care at the arena. Now, this was a case where he was perfectly fine going into the fight and just didn't have the care that he needed when he needed it. So imagine it came out that a fighter was known to be damaged going into the fight. And this is in 2023. This isn't back in the 80s, like in the early 80s with Muhammad Ali. Okay, that they knew Errol Spence was in this condition, and then he ends up in a coma or ends up severely damaged after that fight. They would be opening themselves up to a massive lawsuit, and people would be facing prison time. So I don't think that's the case. Okay. Now, what's more likely than not the case? It would have to be. Let's look at it. Errol Spence has fought twice since the car accident. He beat Danny Garcia and he beat Yordenis Ugas, both in pretty dominant fashion. I mean, there was a moment there in the fight against Ugas where it looked like he might have been stunned or he might have been hurt, but for the most part, he dominated the fight and he dominated Danny Garcia. People were saying he looked good, he was back, whatever. So, more likely than not, what contributed to his performance against Terence Crawford was the fact that, well, one, Terence Crawford is just all wrong for his style. Okay, and Terence Crawford would have beaten Errol Spence if they had fought 5 years ago or if they fought when they did. Two, the car accident was 4 years ago, and in the last 4 years, Errol Spence has fought twice. Okay, that's 2 times in 4 years. That's not going to keep his reflexes. That's not going to keep his balance and all those things as sharp as they need to be. He may be able to get away with that against a guy like Danny Garcia or Ugas, but at the very, 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 very top against a guy like Terence Crawford, he's going to exploit every single mistake you make, every single hole that you have in your game. Okay. Now, I remember a time when if a guy was out of the ring for a year or more, he was considered rusty and would almost have to always take a tune-up fight before he stepped up in competition again. And Errol Spence had been out of the ring for almost 18 months before fighting Crawford. Okay. Now, we also know that Errol Spence, through the years, has not taken very good care of his body. Okay. He always makes weight and he always looks good, leading up to the fight. But in between fights, he did a lot of drinking, did a lot of partying, ballooned up in weight, had to always cut weight in his camp. And that sort of thing takes a toll on your body. Okay, maybe he was able to get away with it in his 20s and he was able to bounce back and be sharp. But when you start getting north of 30, your body just doesn't respond the same way. It just doesn't. And heck, the reason he got in the car accident to begin with is because he was driving drunk, coming home from a club. He was out partying. This was a little bit after his fight with Sean Porter. Okay. Now we know Terence Crawford. I don't know if he completely abstains from alcohol, but I know he's pretty much in shape year round. I don't think he has the reputation of being out and partying and clubbing as much as a guy like Errol Spence does. So he just takes better care of his body. And even though he's a couple of years older than Errol Spence, he probably has a better internal structure than a guy like Spence, who's put a lot of substances into his body that aren't going to help his performance. So, I've seen a lot of people, like I said, online in here in the comments and such, just saying that, this is 100% what happened to Errol Spence, when we have no idea. We have no idea. And to just latch onto this and say that this was the case is just, I think it's silly. I think it's silly. So all props to Terence Crawford for his performance against Errol Spence. And we'll see what happens to Errol Spence. Um, maybe he bounces back and he looks good when he's against somebody who's not at the level of a Terence Crawford. So we'll just have to wait and see. He's not going to be in the ring anytime soon. Certainly not. I would say with certainty, not at any time for the rest of 2023. So I would say at a minimum next spring, 2024, or even next summer, a year from now, is the next time we're going to see Errol Spence. So let me know what you all think. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.